According to several witnesses, there was a secondary explosion that took place in the basement of the North Tower just before the plane hit the building.
At 8:30, he says he was headed to level B4 in Tower 1, 4 stories below ground.
I go downstairs, the foreman tells me to go to remove the containers. As I'm walking by the main freight car of the building, in the corridor, that's when I got blown. I mean, the impact of the explosion, of whatever happened, it threw me to the floor.
Morelli then remembers a second explosion, separate from the first.
I was racing, I was going towards the bathroom. All of a sudden, I opened the door, I didn't know it was a bathroom, and all of a sudden a big impact happened again. And all the ceiling tile was falling down, the light fixtures were falling.
According to the 9/11 Commission, it was the jet fuel pouring down the elevator shafts that caused the explosion in the basement. From the final report we read, a jet fuel fireball erupted upon impact and shot down at least one bank of elevators. The fireball exploded onto numerous lower floors, including the B4 level, 4 stories below the ground. But the witnesses described an explosion that took place in the basement before the impact of the plane.
Very strong. Boom! An explosion so hard that pushed us upwards. Upwards. And it came from the basement between the B2 level and the B3 level. And at that moment, I thought it was the mechanical room where they have all the pumps and the generators for the building, that maybe a generator just blew up on the basement. Now, 20 years in the building, you know something that comes from the bottom and something that comes from the top. And when I went to verbalize that it was a generator, we hear, boom, all the way on the top, the impact of the plane on the top. 2 different events, 2 different times.
There are others who remember several explosions after the one from below.
It came from, I believe, at first we believed that it came from the mechanical room. Then we heard a series of other explosions that sounded up on the above levels of the building.
I was in the B4 level, and on my way, I heard a bomb. So I says, probably the transformer again blew up. So I stepped back, finished what I had to finish, and I started towards the door again. And there come a big blast with a big ball of fire.
The 2 separate explosions were recorded at a distance of about 9 seconds from each other during a business meeting that was taking place in a building nearby, One Liberty Plaza.
What the heck was that? It was at the Encore. Wow. It sounded like something crashed.
When faced with this precise question, the editors of Popular Mechanics chose not to answer it, and fell back on the generic explanation of the jet fuel in the elevator shafts.
Ask what your guys' explanation is for Willie Rodriguez's testimony that he heard, experienced, and his coworkers were actually burned by an explosion in the basement of the North Tower prior to the plane hitting, and this has been verified by at least 20 different eyewitnesses.
Jim Meggs of Popular Mechanics.
When the plane struck the buildings, they penetrated the internal core. Jet fuel poured down stairwells and elevator shafts, setting off secondary explosions. Not to mention the horrific impact of these fully loaded planes hitting the structure and causing enormous swaying.
It's interesting to note too that
you still didn't address the fact that it was before
Empire State Building crash back in 1945.
But the explanation of the jet fuel in the elevator shafts has several problems of its own. First of all, there were no regular elevators connecting the basement to the top levels of the towers. Each tower consisted of 3 separate buildings, built on top of one another, each with their own elevator system. There were only 2 elevators connecting the lobby to the 44th and 78th floor. But the plane struck on the 95th floor, which means the fuel could not have poured down these elevator shafts. There were only 2 banks of elevators that went all the way from the basement to the top of the towers, and they were mostly used by maintenance people. In one of these elevators was Arturo Griffith.
Well, I was on my way from B2 to 49th floor.
Not only didn't Griffith get cremated by this supposed ball of fire, but he also remembers 3 separate explosions.
And there was a loud explosion and the elevator dropped. When the elevator finally stopped, they had an explosion that bring the doors inside the elevator. And then they had another explosion on the panel that threw me, against the wall.
Most importantly, the theory of the jet fuel in the elevator shafts fails to take into consideration the volumes involved. Each tower had an approximate volume of 2,160,000 cubic yards. The planes that hit the towers carried an estimated 10,000 gallons of fuel each at the time of impact. 10,000 gallons is the equivalent of 50 cubic yards. This in-scale graphic shows what 50 cubic yards look like next to the volume of the tower. Assuming that about half of the fuel was consumed in the initial explosion, we would be left with some 25 cubic yards of fuel available. But most of this fuel is needed to ignite the fires at different floors, as explained by Mr. Meigs himself.
Jets crashed into buildings. They crashed at an angle, which meant that their wings, which is where they store most of their fuel, cut through multiple floors. So they splashed fuel and debris across multiple floors of the building, igniting fires.
So even assuming that, for some strange reason, 5 of those cubic yards were all to end up in the only elevator shaft that goes all the way to the bottom of the tower, there wouldn't be enough to reach the basement in significant quantities. Your typical 10-foot by 30-inch backyard pool contains roughly 1,000 gallons of water, which is the equivalent of 5 cubic yards. Imagine dumping the water from this pool into this kind of elevator shaft with a drop of more than 1,000 feet below, and you'll get the idea of how much fuel can actually reach the bottom. In any case, the fuel in the elevator shafts theory could never account for the powerful explosion that literally devastated the lobby of the North Tower 1 hour after the first impact and before the collapse of the South Tower.
There was a secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
Then somebody said that they saw an airliner going to one of those towers. Then, I don't know, an hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much lower. I don't know what on earth caused that.
In fact, these firemen reported 3 large explosions in Tower 1, which took place after the plane's impact. They also confirmed it was the 3rd explosion to devastate the lobby of the tower.
It was an explosion. We was in the lobby and the 3rd explosion, the whole lobby collapsed on us.
What you told me is that there was a plane or whatever hit the building, then a secondary explosion.
It was like 3 explosions after that. We came in after the fire. We came when the fire was going on already. We was in the staging area inside the building, waiting to go upstairs. Then it exploded. The whole lobby collapsed on the lobby inside.
It took these witnesses about 1 hour to walk down from the 82nd floor to the lobby of the North Tower after the impact of the plane.
We got to the 4th floor from 82nd floor.
We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, it was this big explosion. I don't know if
everything went
just like what you just seen, that's what we went through before we came out of the building. Then when we get out the building, there's another smoke cloud came.
A similar story here, the long descent from Tower 1 and the big explosion in the lobby.
It was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, we were coming out on a mezzanine level there, and another explosion came right from it, because everyone flying.
Yet another similar story.
Big boom, come down the steps, everything fine till we got to the basement, and everything just fell in. I got trapped in there with another guy, crawled out, kept getting hit in the head, had bags rolled around, finally we clawed our way out over the rubble.
The situation in the lobby was such that there was no doubt on what had happened.
The ladies that are with me were in the World Trade Center in the first building and escaped through the lobby, where they believe there was a bomb in the lobby.
We ran down the steps to the lobby. There was no lobby. Everything was torn up.
We came outside in the lobby. There was no lobby. The lobby was totally gone.
Did you see other people?
There was a woman there with her face blown off.
Big glass lobby, and all the glass was broken. Wires hanging from the ceiling, the signs that would hang above telling you where to go were all hanging. It was unbelievably scary to look at.
Firefighter John Schroeder was climbing the stairs of Tower 1 when he heard the huge explosion from below.
We were heading up to the 24th floor of the stairwell, and all of a sudden our building got rocked. We got bounced around in the stairwell like pinballs, man. And we just said, you know what? Time to go. We came down, it looked like a bomb went off in the lobby. Everything was exploded, everything was gone. We're like, what is going on here? For every window in the lobby to be exploded. I mean, them windows were like as thick as forget it. They were 2-3-inch glasses, you know, come on. They exploded out of the lobby, you know, something, it wasn't from the jet fuel. No way.